The difficulty is that there's an increasing demand for curtailing the number of people coming into the country, but without much thought going into the practical consequences and effects on the migrants and what it's doing for the economy.
We saw net migration increase by more than 4 times. We saw the number of immigrants coming to the UK in a single year peak at more than 1.3 million.
But we had, in 1 year, population growth of 1.5%, which really we haven't had for 200 years.
And the rise of right-wing parties across Europe is definitely a threat to current governments. And so governments have to feel they have to get their voters back, because governments are primarily concerned with, despite what they tell you, is being elected next time. Essentially, what happened was European migrants were just replaced with migrants from Africa and Asia and South America.
The crackdown and the raids on nail bars, restaurants serving Indian curry, rhetoric hardening, several students being told that their dependents will not be allowed to enter into the United Kingdom. Just a generic crackdown on immigration laws and tightening of rules. All of this pointing to perhaps a more stringent and a Britain which looks like it's taking back control of its borders. What does this mean for Britain's identity? What does it mean for Britain's economy and its future? On this special edition of Out of Britain, I, Radhika Iyer, am going to meet with several academicians, legal experts, students, and also people who are general citizens of Britain to ask one very simple question. What is the future of Britain going to be with its identity constantly changing vis-a-vis immigration? What are we as Britain becoming? Is Britain going the Trump way when it comes to immigration? I have with me some excellent experts in this subject matter, and I'm going to quickly do some introductions. Dr. Alan Manning, former chair of the UK Migration Advisory Committee and also professor at London School of Economics. Thank you for joining us. We come to you from London School of Economics. Mifnia, who is a researcher at the Migration Observatory at Oxford University. Harjab Bungle is a well-known senior counsel of immigration and someone who's often the one who people knock doors at with queries and with several cases, I presume. Om is a student of what at Queen Mary?
I'm doing a master's in investment and finance at Queen Mary.
Investment and finance, and I'm presuming you made a huge investment to be a student there at Queen Mary. What about yourself?
I'm a student at the LSE and I do social policy and economics.
And your name is Disa?
Yeah.
Thank you, Disa.
I'm Vanya and I'm an incoming law undergraduate at Oxford.
Okay, excellent. Congratulations on your Oxford stint that's likely to start in September. Before we go on to discussing or getting viewpoints from each of us standing here, let's go to Harjab to try and understand what changes have happened in the UK and what is the purpose of us having this conversation. Harjab, we are recording this in the month of May in 2025, and just in the last 20 days or so, we've seen so many changes being proposed. What's going on?
Yeah, essentially there's no changes being made. It's a proposal. A white paper is the government's policy. It sets out their policy for the upcoming term as to what they think it should be. And on immigration, they've made various proposals. One of being reducing the PSW or graduate visa that we see you get after you graduate from 24 to 18 months. Secondly, to stop overseas recruitment of care workers, which effectively is in place at the moment, and to use an existing pool. To put an onus on UK-based employers to prove that they're investing in UK British citizens to fill job shortages before they go and recruit overseas. And similar stuff which they're doing. We already have no dependents in place for a lot of students and care visas. So in this respect, it's proposals. What happens is a white paper is consulted on by many people. It then gets presented in the format of a bill. Sometimes there's a draft bill and a white paper. And then if everyone agrees on it and it gets voted in, and we've got to remember this government has a huge majority, so the likelihood of what they want getting in, it's quite likely. Then that becomes
the quorum, yeah?
Yeah, that they get the quorum, and then it becomes an act. So at the moment, the changes are quite, people see it as stringent. The government see it as a way to reduce what they call net migration.
Yeah.
Net migration means the actual people who stay on after their visas finish, or the people who don't go back when they come in. So the government has tried various ways to reduce that. Under Rishi Sunak, it was very, very high, in fact, record sort of numbers. And the government have reduced that. They had 3 targets when coming in to government. One was to reduce the number of visas being granted, which they've done. They're doing at the moment. 2, to increase the number of people who shouldn't be here, sending them back, which they're doing. And the third is to stop the famous small boats. However, this white paper doesn't really address that. It's more addressing the legal migration routes as to how to consolidate the first 2 aims of the government.
Thank you. Thanks for explicitly sharing that. So this is a white paper. It's not yet law, but as Harjab indicated, that it's quite likely that the Labour government, led by Sir Keir Starmer, could perhaps win the majority. Quick thoughts. When are these proposals after consultations with Migration Committee, Action Committee? Is that your experience? How does this work?
Well, it varies. The government with a majority in Parliament can basically do what it wants. So it's not obliged to consult with bodies like the Migration Advisory Committee. But they often choose to because, that committee has people who understand the data, understand the visas and, perhaps have a more independent perspective on things.
Sure. So like it says in the title, it's an advisory committee and clearly the advice should be taken before a law is made rather than after. And we've seen instances where something was announced and then there was advice taken from the committee and then they reversed that particular decision. Parminder Saini, another senior solicitor of immigration, joins us. Let's get your thoughts. Harjab just shared this and this are the likely proposed changes. What has it done to people in general? Have you seen a lot of traction from people? What is the immediate on-ground effect?
The on-ground effect, I think it would be safe to say, is quite devastating for the migrant population here in the UK. The difficulty is that there's an increasing demand for curtailing the number of people coming into the country, but without much thought going into the practical consequences and effects on the migrants and what it's doing for the economy. To my mind, personally, this looks like the first time the government has actually engaged with what it could do to try and bring down numbers, but at the same time, increase prospects for those who are here, whilst making it also more stringent so that those who do come, it has to worry about less after they've arrived. So I see this as something which is done after the cat has gone out of the bag, but it is better late than never. But it doesn't also rectify the damage that has been done to the UK economy and also to the plight of many students, because many of them are leaving the UK and going to warmer climates, literally.
Okay, warmer and welcoming as well, perhaps. Mehnia, your initial thoughts. How did you react when you read this? Were you like, oh my God, or were you like, fine? What's your view?
So, I think it's important to keep some perspective on these things. And when we zoom out, the way we should look at this paper is in the context of everything that's happened with UK immigration in the last 3 to 4 years. And what we've had is essentially, once Brexit happened, once we moved to a new immigration system after Brexit, there was a significant liberalization of the UK immigration system. Introduction of the graduate visa, opening up work visas to a number of many other professions that were lower skilled, such as the care route. And as a result of this liberalization, numbers reached record levels. We saw net migration increase by more than 4 times. We saw the number of immigrants coming to the UK in a single year peak at more than 1.3 million. And in response to these numbers, which were unexpectedly high, the previous government under Rishi Sunak started rolling back some of those measures and trying to reverse that liberalization. I think the best way to look at this white paper is as completing that process of rolling back the 2021 liberalization and essentially bringing us to a point where we're much closer to the immigration system that we had for non-EU citizens before Brexit up to 2019.
Can I ask you to break it down in terms of numbers for us? At what point did you think, as researchers and people who are deep into data and your Excel sheets, what are they informing you? At what point did you think that that's it? This is the cap and the UK needs to act to reduce net migration?
Well, I think there isn't a single number that you should be aiming for in net migration. But we had in 1 year population growth of 1.5%, which really we haven't had for 200 years. And if you have population growth that fast, you have to build lots of new houses, you have to have new roads. It just causes a lot of stresses and strains. And so one of the reasons that you have to sort of limit net migration is that you want to have a modest level of population growth. Probably something in the region of 1/3 to 0.5% a year is what is realistic. And what we had before was just not going to be sustainable on a longer term basis.
Right. So then, are we trying to strike some sort of a balance, or is this going off balance? That's the key, I think, to be able to be seen as welcoming, to be able to be seen as non-hostile, and to be able to be seen as bringing measures, keeping economy and growth as the focus, and not so much on nationalism, perhaps, like we've seen in the US, like we've seen Trump style. Let's ask the students here. What's the buzz in universities? Is there a feeling of feeling unsettled? Is it disturbing? Let's start with you, Om, because you have come in to study.
Yeah.
Tell us about what's happening.
So I came from Mumbai. It's been around 10 months since I'm here. And to be honest, when we came, we had a fair idea of what's going on. But this was quite unexpected for us. Like, there's something that just came up from nowhere, of course, yeah. Thinking from a student perspective.
Is that unfair?
Kind of. Again, it's going to have a lot of economic impact on the UK overall as well, if you think from other perspectives as well. Because a major revenue for UK is from universities. Sure. It's going to get a very big hit on that. Indian students, not just Indian, but Asian students in general, consider UK as a good country to come in. The master's is only for a year and then you're done with it. But now I think they're going to go outside and consider the options as well. So this is one thing that we're going to consider definitely.
I'm going to take a short break now. Thank you for those views already. And in the second half, I'm trying to get some more anecdotes from students, from people point of view. But then what are we as Britain becoming is a question I'm trying to ask from all of us. So stay tuned. Welcome back. What are we becoming as Britain? What is the new identity likely to be? The rhetoric is hardening, but many critics are viewing it as if Britain has become hostile, less warm, less welcoming, and less welcoming of perhaps opportunity for itself, income for itself, and also is it shutting the doors or mildly so on a lot of skills that could be imported into Britain? These are some of the questions that we are asking, while we fully acknowledge the fact that over the last more than a decade or so, Britain's net migration levels hit the roof, much above over 200%. Well, the population certainly did. That is the moderation or the middle path that Britain is trying to take, hopefully. So who wants to go? Let's start with you first, Vanya. What's the buzz in universities? What do students from your friends from other nations have to say? You yourself have lived a little bit in India and you live here.
I think, as said before, as seen with global rise in populism, I think there's definitely a lot of support for far-right extreme parties like Reform. And I think, like, seeing that with young people, with friends, with people that you've known is much scarier. Or, like, not even scary, it's just interesting to see. I think especially on social media, it's very easy to now have clips or like snippets out of context that are then discussed and debated. And there's a lot of hostile debate around it, I think. And it's very much you're either pro-immigration, open the doors, let everybody in, or you're far right, like, racist, essentially. So I think there's definitely a lot of polarization of debate, especially because of social media. And I think it's sad, which is really sad. I think the question that essentially what the question is that can people, is not even just about the numbers, but about integration, about like the people who are coming in. Is there such thing as like one cohesive British culture? And do people have to adapt, or do we have to accept, and where that sort of balance lies? I think there's a lot of debate about British cultures and values. And yeah.
Is there one identity, and is there enough? And if there is, then is there enough integration? Great points. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, doing social policy, we learn a lot about the immigration system on an individualistic scale. So looking at individual people who have come in the country, who have had their own experiences with the asylum system. And doing that, you learn that we need to cut down on numbers, but we also need to reform the way the system operates. Because right now it's very inefficient. And because of that, you get a huge backlog of people who are suffering in the UK. They're being held in places where the treatment is horrible. And that can create a very negative image of immigration in the media. I think if we reform the system and we make it much more efficient, then yes, if there is immigration, it's being dealt with in a much more moral way. And that changes the perception around it. And then, as well as that, in uni, I have a lot of international friends. And one of the major things that has happened recently is that you need to earn a salary of $39,000 upon graduating to then be able to live in the UK. Otherwise, your visa gets revoked and you have to go back. And that's an additional pressure on top of actually studying at university, because to get a job that allows you to earn to that level, unless you're going into a field like law or finance, it's very hard. And a lot of people who come here with visas don't go into those fields. So it's definitely something that the international students have to consider as well. That's what I heard on campus.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. And that's the point of it, right? These are designed to make it hard for net migration to grow up. There was an important point raised about bordering on nationalism. Can there be a moral way, as suggested, a moral way to apply these laws, immigration laws, or contain it? And is this being done keeping economy and growth in focus, or is this more to speak to the nationalist lobbies? That's a question.
I think there is an element of appeasing political and parties, and also trying to get back a vote in this. Definitely a rise of reform and a rise of right-wing parties across Europe is definitely a threat to current governments. And so governments have to feel they have to get their voters back, because governments are primarily concerned with, despite what they tell you, is being elected next time. So that's the key for them. And the essential bit here is that reform and right-wing elements are on the rise all across Europe. We've seen that. Brexit was based on a whole, we want our country back. But essentially what happened was European migrants were just replaced with migrants from Africa and Asia and South America. So there is an identity crisis. You have a certain part of Britain which feels we want to revert to what Britain was like in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s. And there's a new Britain which feels, actually, no, we're more global than that. We want to integrate. We see that in other countries. We see that in India, in states. So Punjabis and people from Mumbai and Delhi, how often do they complain, oh, these people from UP and Bihar are taking our jobs? Indians, before complaining, they should look back home. Yeah, right. So
from state to state, from language to language.
Just state, and God forbid if Bengalis cross the border, then see what happens. But we see that happening a lot. So it's important for the government, they feel, to get a majority and to retain its majority. A lot of it is political, but the fact some of it may not be well thought. We have someone from the Migration Advisory Committee, right? If you're going to limit your pool of care workers to 10,000 and there's 160,000 vacancies, perhaps that might not be a good idea. What are you going to do about 150? You could decimate the care industry with these changes like this. Current industries like hospitality and trucking and transport logistics, they're already suffering. So people should be consulted more. We should have a lot more of this. Rather than people pandering, policy should be about benefiting this country. And perhaps in this case, there is an element of where some of the policy isn't going to benefit this country, and it's pandering to votes.
It's always helpful when politics don't drive policy, but growth and economy does. Are most of these changes, in your view, well researched, well thought of in terms of development, growth, economy, and how it would affect income for Britain? Doctor?
Well, I think there's some more work to be done, because the proposals are still rather sketchy in a lot of quite important areas. I think economically, what's being proposed actually will not have a very big impact one way or the other. I think a lot of the visas were quite poorly designed. So I think, for example, the social care visa, I think actually was neither an effective nor an either financially or practical terms, effective way of filling vacancies in social care in the long run.
But what about student visas? Universities contribute so much to the GDP, and now students are wondering whether they should come to Britain despite the great quality education.
Yeah, I mean, that is addition. I think the issue here is, students come to the UK to study for the education, but also some students come for the opportunities to work here, either temporarily or to perhaps even settle here permanently.
Which isn't the wrong thing.
Which isn't the wrong thing, but I think there's a feeling that the balance between the education and the work got a bit too much emphasis on the work. And so the government is sort of going back to saying, well, if you've got a graduate degree, you can stay if you can find an employer who will offer you a graduate job. But the worry was previously, actually, there were quite a lot of students who weren't really getting graduate jobs and staying, and that wasn't thought to be economically desirable.
Is Britain having an identity crisis? Are we trying to discover a new form of Britain, or is this an identity correction? Any quick thoughts on that? If you had to say it in one line, what would that be?
It's a revert to type. I think Britain has always viewed itself as Fortress Britain, being an island. We're impenetrable, we're impregnable. However, and there is a conflict between the generations. I think that comes out. Otherwise, far-right parties with anti-immigration agendas wouldn't be doing that. But not only Britain, not only British, native British, but in Brexit, if you remember, 50% of the Asian community voted for Brexit. Yes. And one of the reasons they cited was because there's too many immigrants, despite being immigrants themselves.
Irony.
The irony of it, yeah, exactly. So it's more of maybe an age sort of thing. You don't really hear young people saying, well, we don't want immigration, or, we want our country back. It's more of the generation, maybe 50 plus. And ironically, a lot of those votes are in areas where perhaps there's only one or two migrants. Where if I drove down there, or someone like you, they'd look at us like, well, where are you from then? And I'm from Romford, actually. But so it will be, there is definitely an element of that correcting it, trying to please people in that respect.
And that process could likely become a crisis.
Well, only if they lose the election, which at the moment it doesn't look like. But the fact is, it's what you have to see is from a sustainability point of view. When you go to places and things do get overcrowded, when there's 200 people in front of you at A&E, when your child can't get a place at school, or when you have to move from the area, or when crime rises in your area.
Not there yet.
No, we're not there yet at all. But I think this is a way to placate the masses, to try and get the vote down. And also, if you look at the type of people these policies are targeting, it's all about dependence. So they don't mind one person coming. Just don't bring your 4 or 5 that come with you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your great viewpoints and for being as candid as you've been this afternoon. Will Britain manage to find that golden mean balance of trying to be welcoming yet managing its numbers in a way that Excel sheets begin to comfort people like researchers like Dr. Manning and Mehnia? Write your views to us, please. And if you have any questions to ask, we'd be able to ask for you to our panelists. Radhika Iyer signing off on Out of Britain from London School of Economics. Thank you.